So the first thing we're going to talk about in preparation for a treatment with a client is that you need to speak to the patient first. Now, this might seem quite obvious, but you want to find out things like what their expectations are. So, what do they expect when they come to you for this treatment, or when you go to them, as the case may be, for the treatment? Um, do they want you to put the hands on? Do they want you to leave hands off? Do they even know what Reiki is, or how it works? So this is an opportunity for you to discuss it with them and make sure that the person you're about to give the treatment to knows what they're getting, knows what to expect, and is completely comfortable with everything and knows how it works, essentially. Um, the second thing is, do they have any special needs? So this is where the person is going to come to you either in your spiritual space or in your house. Do you have steps into your house, and can the person climb the steps? Is there anything which, I'm trying to think now, is there anything which the client might not be comfortable with if they're coming to your house and you have a dog? Maybe they're afraid of dogs. So you need to make a list of all the things which might be a concern if they're coming to your house, and then speak to the client and make sure that they're okay with all those things. It could be that the client is perhaps allergic to a dog or a cat or whatever animals you have. So that's something you need to take into consideration, in which case you need to say to them, right, okay, well, can I come to you then? So this is why it's important to speak to the client beforehand and to get all these things sorted out, because the last thing you want is them coming to your house and discovering then that there's a problem, essentially. Now, the other thing is you need to meet the client's needs, not what you like yourself. So if, for example, somebody has a bad back or they're uncomfortable lying down on a hard Reiki bed, they may prefer to have it sitting in the chair, which you've perhaps not been trained to do it sit in the chair. Your experience is maybe doing it with a person lying out flat in the bed. You need to adapt what it is that you're doing to suit the needs of the client at all times. Because at the end of the day, they're coming to you for healing. So you need to be adaptable to meet their needs. The other thing is, once you get speaking to them, do you feel comfortable working with them? Do you feel safe with them? Now, this is especially where you're working with somebody of the opposite sex. Obviously, you need to be extra careful then, because you don't want to come in contact with any body parts which could leave you open to accusations of certain things. You want the client to feel completely safe, and that's your first priority. But don't underestimate how safe you need to feel yourself and how comfortable you need to feel in the environment. Because as much as the client might be enjoying it, you may not feel comfortable, and that's not an environment that you should put yourself in. So that's something to consider. Now, what you can do in that case is, if you've met with the person and your gut's saying to you, right, okay, this isn't the right fit, I'm not the right person for them, you can always offer them somebody else that you know who does Reiki, and just say, make your excuses, or say that you're not available, and that, or even just say that your guides are telling you that this person would be a better fit with them. Sometimes we don't necessarily know. It's like when you walk into a room, or you walk into, like a hall where there's different people that you maybe don't know in the hall, and you just get this feeling that one particular person, there's just something about them that doesn't sit quite right with you. And it's that sort of feeling I'm talking about. You need to meet the person face to face if you can. Sometimes it's just a conflict of ideals, or sometimes there's a reason for it. So always listen to your gut, and if it doesn't feel right, then excuse yourself from the situation. Like I say, you can offer them a different Reiki client. Obviously, if there's a serious issue with the person, you're not going to want to pass them on to somebody else. There's by serious issue, I mean if the person's got an attitude problem, or if they're aggressive, or you get the idea. If there's a reason why you don't feel like it's right for them. Or the other thing you could do especially if you're working with somebody of the opposite sex, is to make sure that there's somebody else there with you. So maybe not necessarily in the room with you, because obviously when it gets to the stage of them needing to talk, you want them to feel comfortable talking to you, where they might not feel that way if there's a member of their family or somebody else there with them. But certainly have somebody in the house. So if it's your own house, you could have even a friend come over and be in the next room beside you. Just somebody you can call on, or somebody who you feel more comfortable with them being there, especially if they're the same sex as the person you're working with. So if you're a guy and you're working with a girl, having another female there is maybe a good call. It could be that they bring up emotional stuff that they don't want to discuss with you, and having another girl that they could talk to there could be a good thing. Or again, if you're a girl and it's a gentleman that you're working with, perhaps having another man there would be a good idea too, for obvious reasons. Anyway, that's one of the main reasons why you need to see the person beforehand. Another thing you need to make sure is that they have a clear and definite understanding of what it is that's happening. Now, one of the questions that I ask all my students at various different levels is, what is Reiki? Right? Now, obviously, if you're working with an energy, you should know what it is that you're doing. But the real reason why I ask that so often is because that's the one question that we're all asked the most. And over the years, I've given various different explanations as to what Reiki is, and I adjust it to who I'm speaking to. If it's somebody who has a spiritual understanding, I'll give them one explanation. If it's somebody who is completely novice to the whole thing and has never had any form of spiritual healing before in their life, then I'll give them a simple answer. But at this point, when you're going to have a client working with you, you need to make sure that they understand what it is that you're going to do with them, what it is that they're going to get from it. Excuse me. Yeah, so you need to explain to them that you're just the channel. Under no circumstances should you imply in any way that you are giving them the Reiki. You're not. You're just the channel. And the reason for this is mainly from an insurance point of view. You're not giving them the Reiki. You are just the channel. So you're telling the truth. But you also need to be careful that you're not misleading the client, you're not misleading the person, that they understand that it's the universal life force energy that you're channeling. You're boosting their energy so that they can heal themselves. So it's not even that the Reiki energy is healing them, they are healing themselves, and that's very important. I think a lot of people don't realize that that's part of the process, and that's why you also have the whole emotional baggage that comes with it, and why you have to get things off your chest after you've had a Reiki session. Not all the time, obviously, but when you're really, really needing it, because it's your own body's way of releasing the blockage, of clearing out whatever it is that's causing the pain or the hurt or the where you're needing the healing essentially for. So yes, you need to make sure that you give them a really good, clear, simple but clear and accurate description of what Reiki is, so that they themselves understand it. Now, if you're working with somebody who already works with Reiki or works with spiritual healing, they'll already know, so you don't need to be quite so specific. Just, a wee general double checking that they know what they're getting. And again, also, I can't emphasize this enough, you need to make sure that you decide with the client beforehand whether it's going to be hands-on or hands-off. Now, when I first started doing Reiki, I was very hands-off. I didn't feel comfortable working on hands-on. I didn't like people being hands-on with me, and I didn't like working hands-on with people. Now, some people and some clients I've had over the years really appreciate having it hands-on, and I do now. I'm much more comfortable with it now, and I'm more than happy to receive hands-on. But that needed to be a stage that I worked through myself. But some clients you will get perhaps have been single for years and years. They perhaps haven't had anybody even give them a hug in years. So you're doing them a favour by doing it hands-on, because they're getting that physical contact along with the healing that goes with it. Now, what I would say with that also is be very careful when it comes around to the genital areas and to the breast areas, depending on who you're working with. Obviously, you don't touch private parts We'll put it that way. You don't come in contact with them. Whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, and whether your client's male or female, that's just simply a no-go area. The last thing you want is for a client to become emotionally attached to you. The last thing you want is for a client to become sexually attached to you, or to feel any inappropriate sensations when you're working with them. Now, on occasion, you may see reactions from gentlemen as you work with them. Unfortunately, that's just nature and it can't be helped. But make sure that the person you're working with knows there's a clear line between you as the Reiki practitioner and them as the client, and you can't cross that line with them. That's just simply not acceptable. Right, so the next thing we want to talk about is that you need to make sure, and this will go with your initial conversation with the client, and you need to make sure that they've allowed adequate time. So say you decide that you're going to come to them and give them a half an hour session. Most people want an hour, has been my experience. Now, what I would do in an hour is I'd spend 45 minutes actually hands-on healing. Depending on the person and what they're looking for, I might talk them into a wee guided visualization or put on some soft music and just get them to relax into it and then start the treatment. But that allows 15 minutes at the end. So what happens in that 15 minutes? Firstly, most people, when they lie down on the table, or even when they sit in the chair, it takes them maybe 5 minutes to come back around fully. So you need to allow for that in time. Then you also need to allow for if they need to talk, which happens quite regularly. Give them a wee opportunity to tell you what they experienced, because a lot of the time when you're working with a client, it's all about your symbols, it's all about your hand positions, it's all about remembering all the different things that you have to do. But you need to keep that connection with the client. So giving them the opportunity to discuss what they felt or what they didn't feel, explaining to them that if they didn't feel anything at all, some people feel hot and cold, some people feel tingly. All of that's perfectly acceptable. Some people don't feel anything at all, and that's equally as acceptable. I know one particular gentleman who's a fabulous healer himself, but when you work with him, he doesn't feel anything when you're working with him until the day after or the day after that, or he'll have a really, really good night's sleep. So he knows it's working and he trusts it's working, but he doesn't physically feel anything while you're working on him. So it's very acceptable. Whatever the client feels or the patient feels, that's right for them. Don't try to overanalyze it, and certainly never ever tell anybody that you're picking up any sort of illness. I know I've got a few people that are over in America, and I'm sure it's the same as it is here in the UK. But you cannot tell somebody that you think they have X, Y, or Z. You cannot tell somebody what treatment they should take. You cannot tell somebody anything, because you're not a trained doctor, unless you are a trained doctor. But you're not a trained doctor as far as the Reiki is concerned. And if that person is so engrossed in the energy and so trusting of spirit and so trusting of Reiki and so trusting of you, and you give them the wrong advice, then you're responsible for whatever that wrong advice might be. You might stop them from going to a doctor because they think, right, okay, the Reiki practitioner said I should do X, Y, or Z, so I don't need to go for a doctor. So there's lots of reasons why you don't. So never, ever diagnose a person. If a client has a sore hip, if you're drawn to a particular area, you can say, right, okay, I'm drawn to your right shoulder. And they might say, well, it's my left hip that's hurting. And that's obviously an alignment issue where they're overcompensating for where the problem actually is. So you can say to them, right, okay, well, I'm feeling a little bit hot here, I'm feeling a little bit cold here, or you're feeling really clear. Whatever it is that you're feeling, but don't ever tell them, I think you've got cancer, I think you've got a cyst, I think you've got whatever it is that you think they've got, because you've no way of knowing if that's your mind coming into it or if it's the truth. And the last thing you want is to diagnose somebody and for it to be either not the case and they're worrying about it, or because you don't really know what mental state the person's in either. But aside from all that, it's against the law to diagnose somebody. You're actually breaking the law if you do. So don't. So you need to make time. You need to leave time at the end for a cup of tea, a cup of water, a glass of water, whatever. Just giving them time to come back around, giving them the opportunity to talk if that's what they want to do. some of the most amazing healings that people have received while I've worked with them have actually come from the discussion that's happened before or after the healing. The hands-on healing really didn't have much to do, but they've left the treatment feeling fantastic and feeling uplifted and with a real bounce in their step, because all they needed was somebody to talk to. All they needed was somebody to unburden onto. And that's one of the roles that goes along with the Reiki treatment. So you need to allow time for that. Now, if it comes that the person unburdens beforehand, then do you know what? Trim down the length of your healing session. You'll know from talking with them if you've checked about timing, if they have an appointment afterwards, or if there's maybe, if you're working out of their home, if there's somebody coming home, you know, straight after. So obviously they're not going to want to be all teary-eyed and runny nose when their partner or their children come home. So you need to allow for that time. So what I would say is, if they burden beforehand, then trim down the actual healing time. You can always invite in your guides and say, right, okay, please continue to work with this person while we discuss at the end, but make sure that they're completely grounded and completely safe as they continue on with their journey. So even though you've closed down and you've done everything during the session, you can leave your guide working with them so that they get the maximum amount of healing that they can possibly get. Or while you're talking to them, while they're unburdening on you, you can invite your guides in then and say to them, right, okay, come in and start your work, and when I get to it, I'll get them on their table and I'll do the healing with them. And then you can just close down as normal. So there's lots of ways to get around it, but you need to be adaptable to the client. But if you say to your client it's going to take 45 minutes and you're not out of there in 45 minutes, then that could be holding up their day. That could be stopping them from doing things that they need to do. So you need to be clear at the start, right? Okay, the treatment's going to take 45 minutes, but we allow 15. Now, how long is it going to take you to set up? So if you're going to the client's house, then you need to say to the client, right, okay, is it okay if I come 10, 15 minutes early just to, now, it's up to you what you want to say to them about the clearing, but you don't want to imply to them that there's anything negative in their house. So what I would say is it okay if I can come to your house maybe about 10 minutes before the session, and if you just leave me in the room, I need to do a wee bit of preparation before we get started, and then we can get started at whatever time that you've said. So that gives you the chance to, if you are coming straight from somewhere else and you haven't done your self-healing, that gives you the chance to spend 10 minutes doing it before you start. And you can clear out whatever it is that you've just come from yourself. Because we all live busy lives, and it would be lovely if we could just do Reiki all day 24/7 and not have to worry about normal lives, but it doesn't work that way. Well, not for everybody. Anyway, all right, so then we're going to look at the tools that you're going to need. Now, one of the things you could use to clear the space beforehand is incense. You can use sage, you can use a singing bowl, you can use a drum. Be mindful of where you are and what your limitations are. There is another video on this. If you have a look through my channel, or if you look back in the group, if you're in the Reiki group, there is another video that covers the clearing the space. So I'm not going to go too much into that. So you need incense or whatever you're going to clear the space with. You can purely use the Reiki energy, which is perfectly fine. But depending on where you're going to, obviously, you may need to go a little bit deeper, especially if the person you're going to, if their house, you know, if the client is maybe arguing with their partner or their children or whoever, there may be kind of stale, stagnant, negative energy in the place. So you might need something slightly more, whatever you feel comfortable with using. But obviously whatever the client feels comfortable with using. And if you're going to use something like sage or incense, bear in mind that to some people sage smells like illegal drugs. So they may not wish for it to be burnt in their house. So what I would do is I'd ask them permission beforehand and let them smell it burning. And if they're not happy with the smell, then just have incense as a backup and use the incense instead of the sage. So the other thing you need is a Reiki bed. Now, if you are working from home, obviously you can have your Reiki bed set up, you can have your space cleared, and happy days. If you're going to the client's house, you're going to need a mode of transport to get it there. You're also going to need to make sure that the client has a big enough space to put the bed up in and for you to move around in. So if you're going to the person's house and it's not feasible for them to come to you, then it's very possible that you should just do it in a chair. and forget about the bed. But like I say, it's whatever's most comfortable for the client and whatever suits their needs the best. If you have a Reiki bed, you're going to need blankets and pillows. Now, one of the ways to get around the divide between the male female, when it's a different practitioner to client, when it's one's male and one's female, is to have blankets. Now, you'd probably use blankets anyway. When somebody's coming to you for a Reiki treatment, it can feel quite vulnerable to some, that you're getting into their space and you're getting into their energy. Your hands are coming into their chakras, into their aura. Even if you're not touching them, it can still feel like a bit of an invasion of space. And if you give them a blanket that they can pull over themselves, then that it's like see when you were a child and it was dark and you thought there was a monster, and you'd hear a noise, you'd pull the duvet over your head as a form of protection. Well, it's the same with the blanket and the Reiki bed. It's just a wee bit of, so the client feels protected. Then again, it might be that the place that you're working in is cold and you might need the blanket to keep them warm. Also, bear in mind that when somebody's getting Reiki or when somebody's meditating, their temperature lowers naturally anyway. So having a wee blanket can help regulate their temperature and keep them nice and cozy, because you want them feeling as comfortable as you possibly can. Now, one of the tricks is also where pillows are concerned. Yes, pillows under your head, but if you have an extra couple of pillows for underneath the knees. A lot of people, as they get older, get back pain. And if the legs are lying flat, like if somebody's just lying perfectly flat in the bed, it can start to hurt the lower back. And you want to make like I say, keep saying, you want to make the client as comfortable as possible. One of the ways you can do this is by taking pillows and putting them under the person's knees. Now, it has to raise the knee up slightly, and this will take the pressure off the lower back. So it's always good to have extra pillows there, even whether you have blankets or not. A pillow for under the head, a pillow for under the knees, and just make them maybe a pillow under the feet, depending on the person, is also quite a good, just to make them as comfortable as possible, because when you're lying on a hard Reiki bed for 45 minutes, it can be quite sore. Obviously, if you're working with a client in a chair, hopefully the client has a chair that you can use, but it might be worth your while checking that out beforehand. If the person only has sofas in their house, that's not really ideal for you working, because you're going to hurt yourself. Standing in the same position, leaning over, isn't exactly comfortable for you either. So if they don't have any hard chairs like you'd have at a dining table, then it might be an idea to bring a hard chair with you. You can also get massage chairs, where the person sits, instead of sitting with their back to a chair, they've got their belly to the chair, so you can get access to the back. That's probably the ideal, because then you've got access to the front, you've got access to the back. The other thing to mention is when you're doing the hands-on positions, I'm only going to mention this now because in case I forget it later, but one of the things to be aware of is as you're working with the client client's going to be comfortable. You're going to have to spend like a couple of minutes making them comfortable, making sure the pillows are under their knees nicely, make sure the pillows are under their feet nicely, and they're all nice and comfy. So the last thing you want to do is halfway through a treatment or at the start of a treatment, flip them over to get the palm positions on the back. So what I tend to do is I will stand with my hands either side in line to where they should be, but at the sides of the person, and I will send the energy to the back position. So this just basically means that the person's nice and comfortable, they can relax, they can enjoy the position, but the energy is still getting to where it's needed. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, it's kind of like distant healing, but you're doing it with a client on the bed. You can also put your hands underneath, physically underneath the bed, and do it that way. That works just as well. Obviously, if the client's sitting in a chair, you're not going to get them to sit forward or anything. You're just going to put your hands behind the back of the chair, and the energy will get through the chair nicely too. I just thought I'd mention that there when I thought of it. So yes, blankets and pillows. Music, are you going to use music? Make sure that whatever music you use is comfortable for the client and the client's comfortable with it. Something nice and soft. I love the Sanctuary. It's about a little over an hour long. I find it's really good for clearing a space. So if I'm somewhere that I can't burn incense in, or that I subtly want to clear a space in, then I'll stick on the sanctuary, and I just listening to them chanting the word just really clears me out, but also clears the space out quite well. And everybody that I've met seems to like it, so it's a good one to have in general for people. But again, you need to be careful with music. If you're doing it in a public place, or maybe you want to have earphones and play it on a personal, play it on your phone, play it on an iPod, you know, some sort of MP3 device, so that the person is in the nice quiet place, and they're not hearing everybody walking past if you're doing it in a fair or whatever. Because obviously in a fair you might not be able to play it publicly. Right, so you need to have water and you need to have glasses. Now, even if the person doesn't drink water and says to you 100 times over they don't drink water, when somebody comes round, if they need a drink, they're going to drink the water. They should be drinking water, but they're going to drink the water if that's all that there is available. Now, water is very grounding, which means that when somebody's lying in the bed, sometimes they can fall asleep. Sometimes they can zone out with the energy. Sometimes they can just go to that very special place us mediums call being in the power. I know me personally, when I'm receiving a treatment, I zone out, and it takes me at least 2 minutes to come back around fully. One of the ways in which you can do that is by having a drink. So just be patient. If the person wants to sit there for 5 minutes and not say anything with their eyes closed, obviously be aware you'll see when you're working with the client how deep they're going, and you'll also see how much you need to bring them round. So as the client's lying there, you know, just invite them to come back round, but tell them to take their time. There's no rush. It's the same with when they go to sit up as well. Just let them take their time. Some people will be desperate to jump up, but you'll see if their eyes are kind of sleepy. You'll see when they're coming round, if they're starting to slip back in again. You'll be able to tell from the expressions on their face. So just gently speak to them and keep them present. Give them a glass of water, and then gently sit up with them, let them sit up, and help them off the bed. But again, do it all at their own pace. If it takes 10 minutes for them to come around, that's perfectly fine, because they'll feel better for that afterwards. If you rush them to getting up and, you know, getting their shoes back on and getting blankets put away, and this is another reason for having the 15 minutes at the end, so that they can relax and just come back around at their own time and get up at their own time and kind of move forward at their own time. So having a glass of water ready. You'll be surprised the number of people who'll actually drink water for you after a treatment who say that they don't drink water. Another thing you need is your symbols and prayers. Now, that might be an obvious thing, but especially if you're doing your very first treatment, it's always handy to have your symbols drawn on a piece of paper, because you're going to be nervous. You're going to be trying to remember all the different things that you have to remember. You should know your symbols off by heart, but having said that, on any given day, any one of us are fallible, and we can easily forget a symbol, we can forget the direction, we can forget, you know, whatever on the day. So it's always handy to have them drawn on a piece of paper, no matter how much you think you know them. Have them drawn on a piece of paper, have them in your pocket, have them with you, and the same with the hand positions. It's always good to have them with you, especially the first couple of treatments that you do, so that you've got a wee refresher. Because if you get lost within the energy and what you're feeling, it's very possible you get distracted and forget where you were, or forget what comes next. So if you've got that there, that gives you a wee bit of confidence, and it gives you a wee bit of reassurance that should that happen, do you know what? A quick glance over and I can see where I'm at. What I would say to you about, just while we're on the topic, about the symbols and the hand positions, yeah, the prayers as well. If you feel the need the first couple of times to have your prayers written out, then feel free to do so. Basically, the client's going to be lying on the bed with their eyes closed, so they won't see what you're doing anyway. So, you know, the first couple of times, do whatever you feel comfortable with. Like I say, You should know your prayers off, you should know your symbols off, you should know your hands positions off before you take that step. Having them there as a kind of wee backup, and hopefully you won't need to use them, but having them there as a backup's a really good idea. Should you forget a symbol, a prayer, a hand position, right? The prayer is the big one, okay? The prayer is the big one. Sorry about that. The prayer is the big one. So as long as you have close to what you have in the prayer, then that's all you really need. Set your intention, right? Ask for the Reiki energy to come forward. Ground yourself. Protect yourself. And ask for permission from the client. Simply having the intention that you want to give Reiki to this person for their greatest and highest good in a safe environment is all you really need for that healing to take place. So, if you forget a symbol, call in your guide, say to them, right, okay, give me that symbol, or I want to use that symbol. That is enough for the symbol to be used. You can tell your guide what it is that you want the symbol to do. Equally, that's enough. Simply having the intention is enough for it to happen. Ideally, you need to make sure that you follow every step. Ideally, you need to do it the way you're supposed to do it. But if it comes down to it, don't panic, because your guide will be there with you, and the guide will make sure that you do exactly what you're supposed to do. So just trust. If you get a gut instinct, like I say, as long as you're not breaking any of the laws of your country, or as long as you're not touching any intimate body parts, then I would be inclined to go with whatever it is that you're feeling the need to do. So if you're feeling the need to spend a wee bit longer in a particular area, do it. If you don't feel the need to spend as long in a particular area, don't. So, preparation. The first thing you need to do is to self-heal on the day. This is very important because this gets you cleared out. This gets you in the zone of where you need to be to heal, to work with somebody else. This also tells you if you're in the state of mind that you should be healing somebody else. Second thing for preparation is to clear the space. Now, again, I've mentioned this earlier. I've got another video either in the group or on my YouTube channel. If you look it up, that goes into great detail about clearing a space. If you have any questions, you can leave me a comment or send me a message and I'll answer them for you if I can. Second thing you need to do in preparation is make the patient as comfortable as possible. We've already spoken about this. I'm just saying it again. Do whatever it is that they need. And even if they change their mind on the day, whatever they feel they need in that particular day, work with them, adapt to them. Even if it comes to the point where you have to throw everything out the window and just hold a person's hand, right? This is one of the ways in which if you were to go to a client in the hospital or in a hospice and you don't want to draw attention to the fact that you're giving them healing, you still need to ask permission of wherever you are. So you need to ask permission in reception if you can perform Reiki with whoever it is that wants you to do the Reiki. You can't just give it to them. You need to ask permission first. But what you can do is you can sit beside them in the bed and just hold their hands. Now what I do is I put hold one hand, just like you were holding hands, and I'll put the other hand over the top. So the person's hand is sandwiched between my two hands. And after that, I do everything else exactly the same. I'll do my opening prayer. I'll do my symbols in my mind. Potentially, you could draw the symbols onto the person's hand if you wanted to, but I wouldn't even go that far. Then you visualize your hand positions, work it down the body, or you just channel the energy and let it go wherever it needs to. Because especially if somebody's in a hospice, they're at an extreme condition to be in a hospice. So maybe all they need is the peace. Maybe all they need is just that relaxation, that half hour or 45 minutes that you're going to sit there and hold their hand. Maybe they're going to talk to you through it. So if they're talking to you, you're not going to be able to focus on what parts of the body that you're putting your hands onto in your mind, you know, a bit like distant healing. Um, all you can do is sit there and hold their hand. And the talking, you never know what's going to come out from the talking. It's the most amazing experience to work with somebody in a hospice. And if you get the chance, I would highly recommend it. So like I say, sometimes the rule book goes out the window. You always start with your opening prayer. You always close with your opening prayer. You always ground yourself, protect yourself, and ask for permission. So maybe on the day you get there and the client's just not feeling the hold hand positions, then you can say to them, right, okay, look at, how about I just sit here and hold your hand? You can sit and relax, and I'll give you the Reiki that way. That also gives the person the opportunity to get the stuff off their chest. So maybe you'll sit there holding their hand and they'll talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and you'll find that it was the talking that was the healing and not the actual Reiki that they needed. Because the Reiki energy will always find you the people that you need, and they'll always find the people that need you most. They'll always bring the people that need you most to you. So yes, make the patient as comfortable as possible. Do your opening prayer, do your symbols, ground, attune, protect, permission. The attune is your prayer. So ground yourself, connect with your prayer, ask for permission of the client, and put up your protection. Doesn't necessarily have to be that order, but you have to cover all four. Then do your hand positions. So you're either holding the person's hand and imagining you're giving them the hand positions, or you've got them laid flat out in the bed, you're doing it that way, or they're sitting in the chair, and as best you can, you're doing the hand positions. Then you come to the end, right? After you do all the hand positions, it's purely up to you. Some people rush through the hand positions, and what I would say to you is don't rush, just take your time. You've all the time in the world, especially if it's a wee quick 10-minute Reiki session, then obviously, yes, you're going to have to rush. But if it's a full-blown 45 minutes, just take your time. Really, really take your time. Sorry. Feel the energy. Feel where you need to spend longer. What I normally do is I'll go down the hand positions, and then I'll stand at the bottom or stand at the top, and I will say, right, okay, guides, where else do you want me to go? I'll either feel it in my own body, or I'll be reminded of somewhere which was feeling a little bit hot, a little bit cold, and I'll be drawn back to that area. Or you can simply go down the body, just feel where you're guided to. As most of you will have already heard me say, the original style, or it's my belief, the original style that Dr. Yusi himself taught was actually nothing to do with hand positions, but where you were guided, you went to where you were guided and you spent the time wherever you felt you needed to go. Hand positions obviously are more in line with the chakras. So do your hand positions to start with, especially if you're hands-on. You don't know if the person that's come to you is used to the hand positions or not, and you don't want them to question how valid your Reiki is, because you don't give them the hand positions. So especially if you're hands-on, sometimes the clients will open their eyes randomly through it, and they'll say to you after, God, I thought you were at my feet, but you were actually up at my shoulder. That's really weird. Or I thought you were at my shoulder, but you were at my feet. And it's just because they're feeling the energy, and they just want to check that it's not their imagination. This is perfectly fine if they want to open their eyes during any of it. But yeah, especially if you're doing it hands-on, start with the hand positions, work down, and then when you come back, then when you get to the end of all the hand positions, go to where you're guided to. If the person said to you, right, okay, I've got a pain in my shoulder, can you spend an extra bit of time there, or can you, concentrate on that? Then what I would do is go there first, so that even if you don't feel like you need to be there, the person has specifically asked for that. So take your time, spend it on the shoulder, see how it feels, and then go to wherever you're drawn to. It's a good idea to have a clock as well. I didn't mention that in the tools, but it's a good idea to have a clock or a watch. Some Reiki masters teach that you're not supposed to wear a watch when you're working with the energy. It's not something which I necessarily feel one way or the other about, so it's purely up to you. I don't wear a watch as a rule, but it's up to you whether you want to take it off before you start working. But make sure that if there's not a clock in the room, you have some way of seeing the time, and you can keep an eye to the time, because it's very easy to get caught up in the energy and to not realize that you've spent so long in somewhere. Or you may think that you've spent longer and then realize, wait a minute, only 10 minutes have gone past. So it's always wise to have a clock or a watch and to know when about the 45 minutes should finish. So you've finished all the hand positions, you've gone to wherever you're needed, then you're going to ground the client. Now, how I do this, the way I actually do it is I'll work down one side, and when I get to the foot, I'll ground. If I'm doing hands-on, I don't. I get as far as the foot and I leave the foot, then I go down the other side and get to the other foot, so that the last thing I'm touching is their feet for hygiene reasons. Because obviously you don't want to be touching their feet and then going back up to touch their shoulders. So I'll do their feet last. And the way I do it, and I'm not saying this is the way you have to do it, this is just the way I feel comfortable doing it, is I'll put one hand on top of the foot and I'll put one hand on the bottom of the foot and the sole of the foot. Now, even if I'm not hands-on with the person, I tend to do this. And what I'll say to the client beforehand is, right, okay, I'll start with my hands on your shoulders so you know that I've started. I'm going to touch your foot at some point, your feet at some point during it. And then when I put my hands back on your shoulders, you know I'm finished. So you put one hand on the sole of the foot and one hand on the top of the foot. You can either ask for the person to be grounded, or you can feel for the person to be grounded. Now, what I mean by this is I work a lot with my breath, and I feel the energy a lot with my breath. So I'll take a deep breath, and as I let it out, I feel the energy travelling down through my head, through my shoulders, down through my arms, through my chest, all the way down to the feet. I do that on one foot, and then I do the same on the other foot. So I'll feel it all down the left-hand side, then I'll feel it all down the right-hand side, or whatever the case may be. What happens is, if the person has a blockage or somewhere where I need to go back to, I'll get stuck at that point. It's hard to explain. Sometimes it's like I'm feeling it in my own body, but I'm not. I'm feeling their body. You'll notice too, the more you work with clients, that your breathing and your heartbeat, when you're in tune with the client perfectly, will match the client. A bit like when you're giving somebody a cuddle and the two of you start breathing at the same time. It works the same way when you're working in their energy. It's not a conscious thing, but your breathing starts to match theirs and your heartbeat. So you'll notice like a wee heartbeat on the neck, or somewhere, and you'll feel that it's in time with yours. So yeah, it's just like that. Feel where there's a blockage. Feel where you can't get the energy down through. Go back to that area. Spend a wee couple of minutes at it, and then come back and finish off the grounding. And then do the same for the other side. So you should feel when you come back to it that it's flowing more. You essentially want the person to feel completely grounded and completely back to normal when you've finished. Now, some people will, some people won't. It just depends on how deeply they're in it and how deep they've gone. So you need to make sure that when you bring that person round and when you walk away from that person, when you leave them after the treatment, they're completely grounded and completely back to normal. Now, one of the ways you can do this, like I say, that's one way with the energy, and you should be doing that anyway. You can give them water. Drinking water helps. Also, eating something is a good way to ground. Now, I remember the first time I heard that, a girl told me that chocolate was a good way to ground, and I thought, nah, chocolate makes me kind of swing from the lanterns. But it's actually true. If you eat something, then that's the best way to kind of bring your energy back into the room. So if you're in the person's house, you may offer them a wee something to eat, a wee biscuit or something, just something simple, nothing too heavy. You don't have to go make them a 4-course meal or anything. But the water should bring them right. It's just in some cases people go really, really deep, and they find it a little bit hard to come back around afterwards. So giving them something to eat. Another thing you can do is, if they're mobile enough, you can get them to stand up and just march on the spot. So they're making contact with the ground, with the soles of their feet, which is a really good way to bring somebody around. Also, breathing is really good. So get them to take a couple of nice deep breaths. Do it with them. In out, in, out. And by doing that, you're bringing the oxygen, you're increasing the amount of oxygen in their blood system, which is naturally waking up all their muscles and their organs and stuff. So there are a couple of different ways that you can bring. Most people will come around pretty quickly anyway, within a couple of minutes or at least by the 15 minutes that you've allocated for it. But it's just in case somebody's really struggling to come around. So if somebody's struggling to come around, don't leave them. Number one, health and safety at all times. If you walk away from that person and they try to get off that bed when they're not fully round, then you're responsible for them if they fall on the floor. So you need to make sure that if you're going away to get them a cup of tea, a biscuit, whatever to help bring them round, that you take them off the bed and you sit them in a chair and that they're sitting comfortably somewhere where they're not going to fall over, somewhere where they're not going to hurt themselves, because ultimately you are responsible for that person. Right, so you've grounded the person. Next thing, you need to fluff their aura. And what do I mean by that? You start at the feet and you're working around both sides, so around the outside, one hand up the right, one hand up the left, and you're going right the way up to the head. And it's like you're flicking away. So you've worked on the client, you've cleared out any blockages. So you're flicking away the negative energy, you're flicking away whatever it is that you've cleared away from the person. So you flick it out all the way up to the top. Make sure your hands cross over so that you get every bit of it. And then you're smoothing it out as you come back down. So you start at the feet, going up the way to the top of the head, and then you're coming back down to the feet again. But on the way back down, you're smoothing it out and you're putting it all back together. So it's like if you imagine somebody ruffling somebody's hair. So you're sticking the hands in the person's hair and you're making it all kind of like they've just got out of bed. And then, so that's you getting away any of the blockages or any of the stuff that you just cleared out from the energy. And then you're patting down the hair and you're putting it back into place. So you start at the top of the head and you stroke all the way down. Again, one hand on the right hand side, one on the left hand side. You're not actually touching the person, you're just doing it to their aura. So you're about maybe a foot or two away from the person's body, as best you can, because obviously you're reaching across the person with one hand. As you're moving down, all the way down to the feet. And then as you get to the feet, you bring your hands together in the prayer position and you say thanks. You thank your guides for working with you, and you thank them for any healing that's taken place. And you do your closing prayer. You ground yourself, and you disconnect. So like I've just said, to finish off then, you're staying with the patient until they're fully returned. You offer them water. And then the number one thing, and I've said this a couple of times already, the number one thing is listening. There's so much healing that can come from listening. You have no idea how much, and I don't think people realise it themselves either. Just by listening to them is enough to help them heal. You don't have to have, and you shouldn't try to give them advice. You're just there to listen. You're just there to heal. You're not there to give them answers. So if they stop talking, if they're talking about something and then the conversation dries up, try to say as little as possible, but you want to ask them open questions. So you want to ask them questions where they have to give you a spiel back. You know, they can't just say yes or no. Yes or no are closed questions, are closed answers to closed questions. So you want to ask them questions like, how did that make you feel? How do you feel about it now? What do you think will be the outcome? What would you like to be the outcome? Whatever the question, or whatever you feel that the appropriate question is. Like I say, keep it short and sweet. Let them talk. Don't try to give them answers. Don't try to fix anything for them. That's not your job. Your job is just to listen. Your job is to let them unburden. Your job is to let them come up with whatever answer is that they need. So that's pretty much the rundown of the treatment. Now, once the person's finished crying or talking or laughing or joking, because sometimes it's upliftment that they get from it, and they're having a laugh and they're having a joke, and that's actually part of the healing as well, just having that belly laugh, talking about nothing, but just really enjoying each other's company. And that's perfectly fine too. Whatever the client needs is what the client will get and what you'll bring bring forward to them. Something I didn't mention in the tools also, which I should have, is tissues. One of the biggest things. It's always a good idea to have tissues. Now, the other thing you maybe want to mention to the client is that they need to be not careful, it's not the right word. They need to be gentle with themselves for the next 24 hours. So they might feel a little bit emotional. They might feel, over the moon. They might be extra happy. Or they may find that they have physical things, like they might have diarrhea. They might get, what do you call it? Hay fever symptoms. So they might have a runny nose. They might end up with a wee cough. But it should only last 24 hours. And please stress that to them. So if it lasts any longer, it's nothing to do with the Reiki treatment. It's also a really good idea to say to the client that if they need to talk to you after the fact, or if they've got any questions, to get in touch with you. Make sure they have either your telephone number, an email address, somewhere they can text, whatever way they can get a hold of you. But make sure that you maintain a professional distance from the person. Don't let anybody take advantage of your kind nature. So what I mean by that is, it's all very fine you haven't given them a Reiki treatment, but you don't want to spend all your time listening to their problems. And that sounds a little bit heartless or a little bit cruel. But you're either their Reiki practitioner or you're not. You're either their friend or you're their Reiki practitioner. You can't be both. So it might get to the stage where you have to say to them, right, okay, do you want to book in for another appointment? And that sounds very cold and it sounds very harsh, but it's not until people really, really cling to you and, how can I put it? It's almost like you become a crutch to them. That's not good for you and that's not good for them. So if they want to book you in for another treatment with you, that's perfectly fine. I would make yourself available if they have any questions or any worries or any issues after the treatment. And it's also a really good idea to suggest to them the next treatment. Now, what I was told when I did my training was that for a Reiki treatment to be effective, it takes 4 treatments. So that might be something you want to mention to them. Depending on the person and the circumstances, you may offer them energy swap. So if they've got a service that you can avail of, then you might say to them, right, okay, obviously I need you to do this for me if you don't mind, and I'll give you 4 Reiki treatments in exchange. Don't get into the habit of doing it for free. Doing it for free is only going to use up your energy, and it's going to let the person undervalue what they're getting from it. I know that, again, that sounds silly, but it's a voice of experience. How are you going to feel when that person turns around in a week or 2 weeks and spends a fortune to go and get some Reiki with somebody else? Which they will do. People don't tend to, there's a certain amount of loyalty among people, but if they're getting it for free from you, they don't value it as much as if they have to either do something to gain it, so an energy swap, or if they have to pay for it. Because they'll always find that the person who charges more, the client will believe has a better service. Stupid as that sounds, they think because you're having to pay more to go to somebody else, then they must be better. They must have extra powers, whatever the case may be. So it's something worth keeping in mind. Okay, I think that pretty much covers everything. And if you have any questions, you can send me a message, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Have a blessed day and the best of luck with your Reiki treatments.